The chandelier in the grand ballroom of the Thorn Plaza Hotel cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. It was a cascade of diamonds and crystal, casting a fractured, icy light over the 300 guests below. Julian Thorn stood at the podium, his tuxedo fitting him like a suit of armor. At 32, he was the youngest billionaire in the architectural world, known for designing skyscrapers that pierced the clouds. He was also known for his eyes, steel gray, intelligent, and utterly dead. Innovation, Julian said, his voice smooth and detached, echoing through the high-quality speakers. It is not just about building higher. It is about building stronger. About creating structures that can withstand any storm, any disaster, and remain standing. He paused for the polite applause. He hated these galas. He hated the smell of expensive perfume and the taste of cheap champagne disguised as vintage. But mostly, he hated the date. December 20th. 5 days until Christmas. 5 days until the 3-year anniversary of the car accident that had taken Meredith, his wife, and left him alone with a daughter he barely knew how to hold without breaking. Tonight, Julian continued, checking his watch discreetly, we raised $5 million for the city's orphanage fund. Because every child deserves shelter. Every child deserves. A ripple of confusion moved through the front row. Julian stopped. Someone was walking up the stairs to the stage. Not a donor. Not a security guard. It was a small figure in pink flannel pajamas with cartoon rabbits on them. She was clutching a ragged one-eared stuffed bear that had been washed too many times. Ilara. Julian whispered, the microphone picking up the crack in his composure. His 6-year-old daughter stopped center stage. The blinding spotlight hit her, turning her messy blonde curls into a halo. She looked terrifyingly small against the black velvet backdrop. She shouldn't have been here. She was supposed to be in the penthouse suite upstairs, watched by the army of nannies Julian paid to keep her safe, fed, and out of his grief-stricken way. The ballroom went silent. Absolute, pin-drop silence. Ilara squinted against the light, searching. When she saw Julian, her face crumbled. It wasn't a tantrum. It was the deep, weary sadness of a child who has spent too much time alone. "Daddy," she said. Her voice was small, but in the silence, it roared. Julian stepped away from the podium, abandoning his speech. He walked toward her, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "Ilara, sweetheart, you should be in bed. Where is Mrs. Higgins?" Ilara ignored him. She looked out at the sea of strangers, the women in red silk gowns, the men in tuxedos. She walked right up to the microphone stand. It was too tall for her, so she grabbed the metal pole with both hands, leaning in. "Excuse me," she said to the room. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd, assuming this was a cute, planned skit. "My name is Ilara Thorn," she said, her voice trembling. And I wrote a letter to Santa. But Mrs. Higgins said Santa can't do big miracles. She said only Daddy can do big things because Daddy owns the city." Julian froze. He was 3 feet away from her, reaching out a hand, but he felt paralyzed. "Ilara, don't," he murmured. She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears that caught the light like the diamonds above. "Daddy," she said, and this time, her voice broke into a sob that tore through the speakers. "I don't want a pony. I don't want the dollhouse. I checked the list. I don't want any of it." She took a breath that shuddered through her tiny frame. "I just want a mommy. For Christmas. Just for Christmas. Please." The silence in the room wasn't just quiet anymore, it was heavy. Suffocating. The nervous smiles vanished from the guests' faces. Women put hands over their mouths. Men looked at their shoes. The pain of a motherless child is a universal language, and Ilara had just screamed it in a room full of people who used money to numb their feelings. "Ilara," Julian choked out. He dropped to his knees in front of her, disregarding the $3,000 suit. He grabbed her shoulders, pulling her away from the mic. "Baby, we talked about this. Mommy is with the angels." "I know." Ilara screamed, pulling away from him. "I know she's gone. But I'm lonely. The house is so big, Daddy. It's so big and you're never there, and Mrs. Higgins smells like bleach, and I just want someone to tuck me in and smell like cookies and call me baby." She dissolved into hysterics, dropping her bear. "Please, Daddy. You buy everything. Buy me a mommy. Please." Julian felt the gaze of 300 people burning into his back. He felt the judgment. Look at the great Julian Thorne. He can build a fortress, but he can't build a home. He scooped Alara up into his arms. She fought him for a second, flailing, before collapsing against his chest, her tears soaking his shirt collar. He stood up, shielding her face from the crowd, his jaw set in a line of granite. He didn't return to the podium. He didn't finish his speech. He walked straight off the stage, through the heavy velvet curtains, and into the backstage darkness. Mr. Thorne. His personal assistant, Marcus, was running toward him, looking pale. I am so sorry. She slipped past security. She took the service elevator. Silence, Julian hissed. He carried Alara to the private elevator that led to the penthouse. She had cried herself into a hiccuping silence. He held her tighter than he had in years. He realized, with a sickening jolt, that she felt lighter, thinner. Had she been eating? Had anyone noticed? I didn't notice, he thought. I was too busy building skyscrapers. The elevator doors opened into the penthouse. It was a masterpiece of modern design, marble floors, glass walls overlooking the city, minimalist art. And it was freezing. Literally and metaphorically. There were no Christmas decorations. No tree. Just cold, white space. He carried her to her room, a space designed by a catalog, filled with toys she never played with. He laid her on the bed. Alara looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. Are you mad? She whispered. Julian sat on the edge of the bed. He looked at his daughter and saw Meredith's eyes staring back at him. The grief he had packed away in boxes rose up, threatening to drown him. But he pushed it down. He was a problem solver. That's what he did. I'm not mad, Alara, he said softly. He brushed a curl off her forehead. Did you hear me? She asked, her voice barely audible. About Santa? Julian closed his eyes. He couldn't do it. He couldn't fall in love again. He couldn't risk that pain again. But he looked at her desperate face, and he knew he couldn't leave her like this either. He made a decision. A terrible, practical, business decision. I heard you, Julian said. He took her small hand in his large one. And you know, sometimes Mrs. Higgins is wrong. Daddy can make things happen. Alara's breath hitched. Really? Yes, Julian lied. I will find her. I will bring a mommy home for Christmas. A real one. The best one, Julian promised. Now sleep. He waited until her breathing evened out. Then he stood up, walked out of the room, and closed the door softly. He walked into the living room and poured himself a glass of whiskey. He drank it in one burn. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed Marcus. Sir. Marcus answered instantly. The PR team is already spinning it. We're saying it was a moment of grief. We're issuing a statement. Stop, Julian said. His voice was back to the cold steel of the boardroom. I don't care about the PR. Sir. I need you to contact the agency. The discreet one we used for the diplomatic escorts last year. There was a pause on the line. Mr. Thorne, surely you aren't. I made a promise, Marcus. My daughter wants a mother for the holidays. I intend to get her one. Sir, you can't just hire a mother. I can hire an actress, Julian said, looking out at the city lights below. I need someone with a maternal look. Warm. Gentle. Someone who can follow a script for 12 days. I'll pay $1 million cash. Non-disclosure agreement, ironclad. Julian, Marcus said, dropping the formality. This is dangerous. If Alara finds out. She won't, Julian said, his grip on the phone tightening until his knuckles turned white. Because on December 26th, the mommy will have to leave for a very important trip, and we will go back to normal. But for Christmas, Alara will have what she wants. I'll start the search, Marcus sighed. Julian hung up. He looked at the reflection in the window. He looked like a monster. But he was a monster who would keep his promise. He needed a woman who could sell a lie perfectly. He had no idea that fate was about to send him the one woman who was incapable of lying at all. CTA. Have you ever promised a child something you weren't sure you could give? That kind of pressure can break you. Tell us your story in the comments below. 24 hours later, Julian sat in his office on the 80th floor of Thorn Tower. The view was spectacular, the city spread out like a circuit board below, but Julian was looking at headshots spread across his mahogany desk. Too polished, Julian said, sliding a photo of a blonde actress toward Marcus. She looks like she's auditioning for a soap opera. Ilara will see right through her. Marcus sighed, adjusting his glasses. Sir, that's 5 candidates from the top agencies. They are professionals. I don't need a professional liar, Marcus. I need someone who feels real. Someone warm. Someone who looks like she knows how to bake cookies without burning the house down. Julian pinched the bridge of his nose. The memory of Ilara's sobbing face at the gala was still searing his mind. He was running out of time. There was one other option, Marcus said hesitantly. Not from an agency. My team found her. He slid a tablet across the desk. It was a grainy video taken on a smartphone. It was a subway platform. A young woman with messy dark hair pulled back in a scarf was playing the violin. Her coat was threadbare, patched at the elbows. Her violin case sat open at her feet, containing a few dollar bills and some loose change. But the music. Even through the tinny speakers of the tablet, it was haunting. It was a sorrowful, rich melody that seemed to stop the busy commuters in their tracks. In the video, a small child dropped a coin into her case. The woman stopped playing, crouched down to the child's eye level, and gave a smile so genuine it made the fluorescent lights of the subway seem brighter. Julian hit pause on that smile. It wasn't a red carpet smile. It was real. It held a hint of sadness, but an overwhelming amount of warmth. Who is she? Julian asked. Kaya Vance. 26. Juilliard dropout. She was on scholarship but had to leave 2 years ago when her grandmother got sick. She's currently 2 months behind on rent for a small apartment in Queens where she cares for her grandmother. They're facing eviction on the 24th. Julian stared at the woman's eyes on the screen. Desperation. He knew how to leverage desperation. Bring her in, Julian said. Kaya sat in the waiting room of Thorn Enterprises, trying to hide the fact that her boots were leaking melting snow onto the plush gray carpet. She clutched her violin case like a lifeline. When the call came, she thought it was a prank. Julian Thorn? The architect who was trying to buy half of Queens to build luxury condos? But the town car that picked her up was real, and the security guards were real. And the ache in her stomach from skipping lunch to save money for her grandmother's medicine was very real. Marcus led her into the office. It felt less like a room and more like the cockpit of a spaceship. And sitting behind the massive desk was Julian Thorn himself. He was more intimidating in person than in the magazines. Sharp jaw, expensive suit, and eyes that looked like frozen lakes. He didn't offer her a seat. He didn't offer a greeting. $1 million, Julian said. Kaya blinked. Excuse me. $1 million. Tax-free. Wired to an account of your choice on December 26th. In exchange for 12 days of your time. Kaya felt a hot flush of anger rise up her neck. She gripped her violin case harder. Mr. Thorn, I don't know what kind of girl you think I am, but I am a musician. I am not for sale. She turned to leave. It's not for me, Julian said, his voice flat. Kaya stopped, her hand on the doorknob. It's for my daughter, Ilara. She's 6. Julian stood up, walking to the window, turning his back to her. Her mother died 3 years ago. She is struggling with the season. At a public event last night, she asked me to buy her a mother for Christmas. Kaya's anger deflated, replaced by a sudden, piercing empathy. A 6-year-old asking for a mother. It twisted something deep inside her. You want me to babysit? Kaya asked softly. I want you to role-play, Julian corrected, turning back to face her. He looked tired. I told her I found someone. You will come to the penthouse. You will stay in the guest suite. You will pretend to be interested, warm, maternal. We will do Christmas activities. On the 26th, you will have to leave for a tour, and life will return to normal. But for 12 days, my daughter gets her wish. Kaya stared at him, horrified. You want me to lie to a grieving child? Mr. Thorn, that's cruel. That's emotional manipulation. It's a bandage, Julian snapped, his composure cracking for a second. A very expensive bandage to stop her bleeding until the holidays are over. I cannot fix her grief, Ms. Vance. I can only manage it. He walked back to his desk and picked up a manila folder. This is the eviction notice for your grandmother's apartment in Queens. And her outstanding medical bills. The air rushed out of Kaya's lungs. He'd done his homework. My grandmother is 78, Kaya whispered. If we lose that apartment, she has nowhere to go. $1 million buys a very nice house, Julian said quietly. It buys stability. It buys her medicine. You have 24 hours to decide. But if you say yes, you sign a non-disclosure agreement that will bury you if you ever speak a word of this. Kaya looked at the eviction notice. She thought of her grandmother's frail hands, the woman who had raised her when her own parents bailed. She thought of the cold winter ahead. Then she thought of the little girl who just wanted a mom. She hated Julian Thorne in that moment. She hated his money and his cold, calculated solution to heartbreak. I'll do it, Kaya murmured, feeling sick. But not for you. For her. And for my grandmother. Excellent, Julian said, sliding a thick contract across the desk. Sign here. You move in tonight. The Thorne penthouse was exactly what Kaya expected, stunning, expensive, and completely soulless. It was dead silent. Julian had given her a dossier on the car ride over. Ilara's likes, pink, rabbits, grilled cheese, crusts off. Things to avoid, mentioning hospitals, loud noises, the color green, her mother's favorite. Just stick to the script, Julian muttered as the private elevator opened into the foyer. Don't improvise. She's fragile. Kaya had left her violin at her apartment, feeling it was too sacred to bring into this lie. She wore clothes Marcus had provided, a soft cashmere sweater and jeans that cost more than her grandmother's car. She felt like she was wearing a costume. Ilara. Julian called out, his voice tight. Come out here, please. I have a surprise. There was a hesitation, then small footsteps pattered down the hallway. Ilara appeared around the corner. She was wearing the same pink pajamas from the gala video Kaya had seen on the news. She was clutching the ragged one-eared bear. She stopped dead when she saw Kaya. Her eyes grew impossibly wide. Julian stepped forward, putting a stiff hand on Kaya's back. Ilara, this is Kaya. She's going to be staying with us for Christmas. Ilara didn't move. She just stared, analyzing Kaya with an intensity that was heartbreaking in such a young face. Are you the mommy? Ilara whispered. Kaya's heart slammed against her ribs. The word felt heavy wrong. She looked at Julian. He gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. Say the line. Kaya looked back down at the little girl. She saw the hope fighting with fear in Ilara's eyes. She couldn't do the script. She couldn't just say yes, I am. It felt too cheap. Instead, Kaya slowly dropped down to her knees, just like she did in the subway station, bringing herself eye level with the child. She didn't reach out. She just offered that same genuine, slightly sad smile. Hi Ilara, Kaya said, her voice gentle and real, nothing like the polished actresses Julian had interviewed. I heard you asked for someone to spend Christmas with. And well, I was hoping you'd let me be that person. Ilara took a tiny step forward. She sniffed the air. You smell like rain. Kaya laughed, a surprised throaty sound that echoed strangely in the silent penthouse. I just came in from outside. It's pouring. Ilara took another step. She looked at Julian, then back at Kaya. She seemed to be assessing if this was a trick. Then slowly, she held out her ragged bear. This is Barnaby, Ilara said seriously. He only has one ear because the washing machine ate the other one. Kaya didn't treat it like a joke. She nodded solemnly and gently touched the bear's remaining ear. It makes him look very distinguished, Barnaby. Like a pirate bear. A tiny giggle escaped Ilara. It was a rusty sound, unused. Julian, standing above them, felt a sudden sharp ache in his chest at the sound. He hadn't heard her giggle in months. Can you read stories? Ilara asked Kaya, inching closer. I read excellent stories, Kaya promised. I do all the voices. Ilara looked at her father. Daddy, Can she tuck me in? Now. Julian felt a bizarre flicker of, was it jealousy? He pushed it down. If Kaya doesn't mind. It's past your bedtime. Kaya stood up, extending a hand. Elara hesitated for 1 second, then slid her tiny cold hand into Kaya's. The contact sent a jolt through Kaya. This was real. The contract was fake, the money was dirty, but this little hand was real. Come on, pirate, Kaya said softly. Show me the way. They walked down the hall together. Julian stood alone in the cavernous marble foyer, watching them go. He had just closed the biggest deal of his life. He had solved the problem. So why did he feel like he had just led a Trojan horse into his carefully fortified fortress? The transformation of the Thorn penthouse happened slowly, then all at once. It started with a smell. For 3 years, the penthouse had smelled of lemon polish and recycled air. But on the morning of December 23rd, Julian woke up to the smell of burning sugar and cinnamon. He walked into the kitchen, fully dressed in his suit, checking stock prices on his phone. He stopped dead in the doorway. The pristine white marble island was a disaster zone. There was flour everywhere, on the counters, on the floor, and a significant amount in Elara's hair. Kaya was wearing one of the chef's aprons, which was 3 sizes too big, conducting a chaotic orchestra of mixing bowls. Okay, pirate, Kaya was saying, pointing a wooden spoon at Elara. The recipe says a pinch of salt, not a fistful. We are making gingerbread men, not salt licks. Elara laughed. It was a full belly-shaking laugh that Julian hadn't heard since she was a toddler. She looked up and saw him. Usually, Elara would freeze when he entered, sensing his stress. Today, she just waved a flour-coated hand. Daddy, we're making an army. Kaya says the gingerbread men are going to attack the snowman cookies. Julian stared at the mess. His housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins, was standing in the corner, looking terrified that Mr. Thorne would fire everyone. Instead, Julian felt a strange loosening in his chest. An army. We need reinforcements, Kaya said, turning to him. Her face was smudged with flour, and her dark eyes were bright with challenge. We have a frosting shortage. Are you going to help, or are you just going to stand there looking expensive? Julian blinked. No one spoke to him like that. I have a board meeting at 9. The board can wait, Elara said, mimicking Kaya's tone perfectly. Kaya bit her lip to stop a smile. Julian looked at his daughter. He looked at the flour on the floor. He looked at his phone, buzzing with emails from people who only wanted his money. He put the phone on the counter. He took off his suit jacket. He rolled up his sleeves. I'm an architect, Julian said, walking to the island. If we're building a gingerbread army, we need structural integrity. Your frosting ratios are all wrong. For the next 2 hours, the billionaire CEO of Thorn Enterprises argued about the load-bearing capacity of gingerbread legs. He got frosting on his silk tie. He laughed when Elara decapitated a cookie. For the first time in 3 years, the penthouse didn't feel like a mausoleum. It felt like a home. That evening, the air in the penthouse shifted from chaotic joy to a quiet, heavy intimacy. Elara had fallen asleep on the sofa, exhausted from the sugar crash, her head in Kaya's lap. The room was lit only by the city lights outside and the glow of the gas fireplace Julian had finally turned on. Kaya was humming softly, stroking Elara's hair. Julian sat in the armchair opposite them, a glass of wine in his hand, watching. He couldn't look away. It looked so real. It looked like the life he was supposed to have before the accident. She's out, Kaya whispered. You're good with her, Julian said, his voice low. Too good. You're making me worry about what happens when you leave. The reminder of the contract hung in the air like smoke. Kaya's hand stilled on Elara's head. She's easy to love, Kaya said softly. She's just lonely, Julian. She doesn't need a mom to buy her things. She just needs someone to witness her life. I try, Julian said defensively. I work hard to ensure she has everything. You ensure she has things, Kaya corrected, her eyes meeting his. But grief is a very big room, and you've left her in it all alone because you're too scared to go in there with her. Julian stiffened. You're crossing a line. You're an employee. I'm a human being, Kaya shot back, though she kept her voice a whisper. And I know what it's like. My parents didn't die, but they left. They chose drugs over me. My grandmother was the only one who stayed. I know what it feels like to wait for someone who isn't coming back. Julian looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the cracks in her armor. The desperation that had made her take this job wasn't greed, it was love for her own family. I'm sorry, Julian said, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. About your parents. I'm sorry about your wife, Kaya returned. She must have been wonderful. She was, Julian said. He took a sip of wine, looking at the fire. Elara has her laugh. That's why it's hard. Every time she laughs, I lose Meredith all over again. But if you stop the laughter, Kaya said gently, you lose them both. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't cold anymore. It was charged. Julian looked at Kaya, her messy hair, the softness of her expression, the protective way she held his daughter. He felt a magnetic pull, a terrifying desire to cross the space between them and bury his face in her neck, to borrow some of her warmth. He stood up abruptly. I should carry her to bed. He walked over and scooped Elara up. Kaya stood up to help adjust the blanket, and they collided. Julian's hand caught Kaya's waist to steady her. They were inches apart. The smell of cinnamon and rain was overwhelming. Kaya looked up at him, her lips slightly parted. The employee line was blurring into nothing. Julian leaned in, his gaze dropping to her mouth. It's a lie, his brain screamed. You bought this moment. I don't care, his heart answered. The moment was shattered by the sharp ringing of the secure elevator bell. They sprang apart, guilty as teenagers. The elevator doors slid open. A woman stepped out. She was draped in white fur, diamonds glittering at her throat, her silver hair coiffed into a helmet of perfection. She looked around the messy room, her eyes landing on the flower on the floor, and then on Kaya. Mother, Julian said, his voice turning to ice. Eleanor Thorne, the matriarch of the family and the cruelest socialite in New York, stepped into the room. She looked at Kaya with the clinical distaste of a biologist examining a bug. Julian, Eleanor said, her voice like cracking glass. I saw the news. About the mystery woman living in my son's house. I came to see if the rumors were true. Elara stirred in Julian's arms, waking up. Grandma. Eleanor ignored the child. She walked straight up to Kaya. And who might this be? The nanny. This is Kaya, Julian said, stepping between the two women, shielding Kaya. She is a friend. A friend, Eleanor sneered. She looks like a street urchin in a cashmere sweater. She turned her cold eyes to Julian. Christmas Eve dinner is tomorrow, Julian. The entire board will be there. Do not embarrass us. Get rid of the stray. She turned and walked back to the elevator without saying goodbye to her granddaughter. When the doors closed, the warmth in the room had evaporated. The beautiful lie was cracking. Kaya wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling very small and very paid for. I should go to my room, she whispered. Kaya, Julian started, reaching out. Don't, she said, backing away, tears pricking her eyes. She's right. I'm just the hired help, Julian. Let's not pretend otherwise. She turned and ran down the hall. Julian stood alone in the living room. The fire was still burning, but he felt colder than he had out in the snow. He had the money, the power and the plan. But for the first time, he realized that when the truth came out, and it wasn't going to be a business transaction. It was going to be a massacre of the heart. CTA, have you ever had a moment of happiness that you knew was too good to be true? A moment where you were waiting for the other shoe to drop? Hit the like button if you've been there. Act 4, The Shatter Point. Christmas Eve dinner at the Thorne estate was not a meal, it was a boardroom meeting with silverware. The dining room table was 20 feet long. At one end sat Julian, looking like a king on a crumbling throne. At the other sat his mother, Eleanor, looking like the executioner. Scattered between them were key board members and friends of the family, all eating silent mouthfuls of lobster bisque. And then there was Kaya. She sat to Julian's right, wearing a midnight blue velvet gown that Julian had delivered that afternoon. It fit perfectly, but it felt like a straitjacket. She caught Elara's eye across the table. Elara was the only bright spot, wearing a matching blue ribbon, kicking her legs under the chair, smiling at Kaya like they shared a secret. We're a family, Elara's smile said. We're a fraud, Kaya's conscience screamed. So, Eleanor's voice sliced through the clinking of silverware. Kaya, is it? Tell us, dear. Where did you meet my son? The table went silent. Julian's hand tightened on his wine glass. Mother, not now. I'm just making conversation, Eleanor smiled thinly. It's quite a romance, isn't it? From, where was it? Queens? To the penthouse in a week. It's a Cinderella story. Though if I recall, Cinderella didn't get paid a salary. Kaya froze. The lobster bisque suddenly tasted like ash. Eleanor, Julian warned, his voice low and dangerous. What? Eleanor feigned innocence, reaching into her diamond-encrusted clutch. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. I was just confused by the accounting. My friends at the bank flagged a rather large pending wire transfer scheduled for December 26th. $1 million. To a K. Vance. She slid the paper across the polished mahogany. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a copy of the non-disclosure agreement. Elara, darling, Eleanor said, looking at her granddaughter. Did you know your father hired this woman? She isn't your mommy. She's an employee. Just like the gardener. Just like the chauffeur. Time seemed to stop. Elara looked at the paper. She couldn't read the legal jargon, but she understood the tone. She looked at Julian, her eyes wide with confusion. Then she looked at Kaya. Kaya. Elara whispered. Is that true? Kaya's heart shattered. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Elara, baby, listen to me. Are you paid? Elara asked, her voice rising to a high, thin pitch. Did Daddy pay you to play with me? Did he pay you to bake the cookies? Kaya choked. She couldn't lie. Not to her. I needed the money for my grandma, Elara. But you lied. Elara screamed. It was a primal sound, filled with the absolute betrayal that only a child can feel. She grabbed the glass of water in front of her and threw it. It didn't hit Kaya, but it shattered on the floor, water soaking the hem of the velvet gown. I thought you loved me. I thought you wanted to be my mommy. I do love you. Kaya cried, stepping forward, ignoring the glass shards. Elara, I love you more than anything. You're a liar. Elara sobbed, scrambling off her chair. She ran to Julian, pounding her small fists against his chest. You bought her. You buy everything because you don't love anybody. I hate you. I hate both of you. Elara turned and ran from the room, her wails echoing down the marble hallway. Julian sat frozen. He looked at the shattered glass. He looked at his mother, who was calmly sipping her wine, having successfully protected the family legacy from an outsider. Well, Eleanor said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. Ideally, we would have handled this privately, but better she learns now than later. These people always leave, Julian. You get what you pay for. Julian stood up slowly. He felt like he was waking up from a coma. He looked at Kaya. She was standing amidst the wreckage of the dinner, tears streaming down her face. She looked at him, waiting. Waiting for him to defend her. Waiting for him to tell his mother that she was wrong, that it had become real, that he loved her. But Julian was a man who operated on logic, and his logic had just blown up in his face. He was paralyzed by his own guilt. He had bought her. That was the truth. Julian started. Kaya saw the hesitation. And that was enough. I understand, Kaya whispered, her voice dead. She turned and walked out of the dining room. 20 minutes later, Kaya walked out of the guest suite. She had taken off the midnight blue gown. She left it on the bed. She was back in her worn jeans, her threadbare coat, and her scuffed boots. She carried her violin case in one hand and her small duffel bag in the other. Julian was waiting for her in the foyer. He looked wrecked. His tie was undone, his hair disheveled. Kaya, he said, stepping forward. You don't have to go tonight. It's Christmas Eve. It's snowing. I can't stay here, Julian, she said, not meeting his eyes. I was an employee. The contract is void. I'm fired. I didn't fire you. Elara did, Kaya said, looking up at him. Her eyes were red, but dry. And she was right. We tricked her. We took the most vulnerable thing in the world, a child's hope, and we turned it into a business deal. We are monsters. I was trying to help her, Julian pleaded. I was trying to give her a good Christmas. You were trying to avoid your own pain, Kaya said quietly. You used money as a shield so you wouldn't have to feel anything. And you used me. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was the check for the advance he had given her for her grandmother's medicine. I can't keep this, she said, holding it out. Keep it, Julian said fiercely. For your grandmother. Please. It's the least I can do. No, Kaya said, dropping the check on the marble table between them. If I keep it, then Eleanor is right. If I keep it, then none of it was real. And I need it to be real, Julian. Even if it's over. She walked to the heavy front door. Kaya, Julian called out, his voice cracking. I love you. The words were right there. He felt them. They were burning his throat. But he was Julian Thorne. He didn't know how to offer his heart, only his wallet. And his wallet was useless here. Kaya waited 1 second for the words. When they didn't come, she opened the door. Merry Christmas, Mr. Thorne, she said. The door clicked shut. Julian stood in the silence. The penthouse was perfect again. No mess. No flower. No laughter. No violin music. He walked into the living room. The Christmas tree they had decorated together twinkled mockingly in the corner. Underneath it sat the presents he had bought, expensive, impersonal boxes. And there, sitting on the floor by the tree, was Alara's ragged, one-eared bear Barnaby. Julian walked over and picked up the bear. It smelled like cinnamon and rain. He fell to his knees, clutching the stuffed animal to his chest, and for the first time since his wife died 3 years ago, the billionaire wept. He cried not for what he had lost in the past, but for what he had just thrown away. He had the money. He had the house. But as the clock struck midnight, signaling Christmas Day, Julian Thorne realized he had absolutely nothing. CTA, have you ever let pride or fear ruin a relationship that meant everything to you? Julian just made the biggest mistake of his life. Can he fix it? Hit subscribe to see the finale. Christmas morning in the Thorne penthouse was quiet enough to hear a heartbreak. There was no sound of tearing paper. No squeals of delight. The pile of gifts under the tree, thousands of dollars worth of toys, electronics, and designer clothes, sat untouched. Julian found Alara in her room. She wasn't playing. She was sitting on her window seat, staring out at the gray, snowy city, clutching Barnaby the one-eared bear. Alara, Julian said softly, standing in the doorway. Santa came. I don't care, she said, her voice dull. She didn't turn around. Julian walked into the room. For 3 years, he had treated her grief like a structural flaw in a building, something to be patched over and reinforced. But now, looking at her small, slumped shoulders, he realized he hadn't been protecting her. He had been isolating her. He sat down on the window seat opposite her. I made a mistake, Alara. Alara turned slowly. Her eyes were puffy. Because you got caught? No, Julian said. He took a deep breath. It felt like standing on the edge of a skyscraper without a harness. Because I was scared. I missed Mommy so much that I thought if I didn't let anyone else in, I wouldn't have to hurt like that again. So I used money. Because money is safe. And money doesn't leave. Alara looked at him, really listening. But Kaya wasn't safe, Julian whispered. She was real. And I drove her away because she made me feel things I thought were dead. He reached out and took Alara's hand. I don't want to be safe anymore, Alara. I want to be happy. But I can't do it without you. And I don't think we can do it without her. Alara squeezed his hand. She lives in Queens, Daddy. It's far. Julian stood up, a spark of life returning to his eyes, the same determination that built skylines, but this time, focused on something that actually mattered. Get your coat, pirate, Julian said. We're going for a ride. The tenement building in Queens was a world away from the Thorne Tower. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and damp wool. The plaster was peeling. Julian Thorne, wearing a coat that cost more than the entire building, looked completely out of place. He held Alara's hand tightly as they walked up the 3 flights of stairs. The elevator was broken. They found apartment 3B. The door was chipped, the number hanging by a single nail. Julian raised his hand to knock, and his hand trembled. He had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without blinking. This terrified him. He knocked. There was shuffling inside, and then the door opened. It wasn't Kaya. It was an elderly woman leaning on a walker, wrapped in a knitted shawl. She had Kaya's eyes, dark and intelligent. "Mr. Thorne," the woman said. She didn't look surprised. She looked assessing. "Kaya is packing. We have to be out by tomorrow." "You're not going anywhere," Julian said firmly. "Please," Kaya's voice came from behind her grandmother. Kaya stepped into the hallway. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She saw Julian, and her face hardened. Then she saw Ilara, and her expression fractured. "Ilara." "Kaya." Ilara let go of Julian's hand and ran. Kaya dropped to her knees just in time to catch the girl. They collided in a hug that seemed to knock the wind out of both of them. Ilara buried her face in Kaya's neck, sobbing. "I'm sorry." Ilara cried. "I didn't mean it. I don't hate you." "Shush, Kaya rocked her, tears spilling down her own cheeks. "I know, baby. I know. It's okay." Julian watched them. This was it. This was the family he had denied himself. He stepped forward. Kaya looked up at him over Ilara's shoulder, her guard going back up. "If you came to offer more money," Kaya said, her voice shaking, "I swear to God, Julian." "No money," Julian said. He reached into his coat pocket. Kaya flinched, expecting a checkbook. Instead, Julian pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the non-disclosure agreement. The contract that said she was an employee, that their time together was a transaction. He held it up so she could see it. Then, deliberately, he tore it in half. Then in quarters. He let the pieces flutter to the dirty hallway floor. "The contract is gone," Julian said. His voice was raw, stripped of all its corporate polish. "And I don't want to offer you a job, Kaya. I want to offer you me." He dropped to his knees on the hard linoleum, ruining his trousers, so he was eye level with her and Ilara. "I am a broken man," Julian said, his voice cracking. "I am work-obsessed. I am emotionally stunted. I come with a terrifying mother and a lot of baggage. But, you woke me up. You and Ilara. You made the house smell like cinnamon. You made me remember how to laugh." He reached out, tentatively, and took Kaya's hand. Her fingers were cold, his were warm. "I bought the building," Julian said quickly. "Not to control you, but because I couldn't let you lose your home. The deed is in your grandmother's name. It's a gift. No strings. Even if you tell me to leave right now and never come back, it's yours." Kaya stared at him. "You bought the building?" "I'm a billionaire," Julian gave a wet, self-deprecating laugh. "It's the only trick I know. But I'm trying to learn new ones. Like, telling the truth." He squeezed her hand. "The truth is, I love you. I fell in love with you over gingerbread men. I fell in love with how you love my daughter. And I don't want a fake Christmas. I want a real one. With you." Kaya looked at the man kneeling in the dirt. She looked at Ilara, who was beaming, looking between them like she was watching a tennis match of happiness. Kaya looked at her grandmother. The old woman leaned against her walker and winked. "Well, I'm not getting any younger, and this hallway is drafty." Kaya turned back to Julian. A slow, genuine smile, the one from the subway, the one that had started it all, spread across her face. "You're really bad at negotiating," Kaya whispered. "You gave me the house before you got the girl." "I don't care about the house," Julian breathed. "I just want the girl." "Two girls," Ilara corrected. "Two girls," Julian agreed. Kaya leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't a tentative mistletoe kiss. It was a kiss that tasted of salt tears and redemption. It was a promise kept. "Merry Christmas, Julian," she whispered against his lips. "Merry Christmas, Kaya." 1 year later. The grand ballroom of the Thorn Plaza Hotel was full again. Another charity gala. Another sea of black ties and diamonds. But this time, the man at the podium looked different. Julian Thorne wasn't wearing armor. He was wearing a tie that was slightly crooked, and he was smiling. "We build structures to protect us," Julian was saying into the microphone. "But a fortress isn't a home. A home is the people you let inside." He looked down at the front row. Eleanor Thorne was there. She looked stiff, but she was holding a program, and she wasn't scowling. That was progress. Next to her sat Kaya. She looked radiant in a red gown, her hand resting on a small noticeable bump in her stomach. She caught Julian's eye and blew him a discreet kiss. And standing next to Kaya, holding a brand new very expensive violin, was Alara. She was 7 now. She marched up the stairs to the stage, just like she had a year ago. But this time, she wasn't wearing pajamas. She was wearing a red velvet dress. And she wasn't crying. Julian stepped back, giving her the spotlight. Alara adjusted the microphone. "Hi," she beamed at the crowd. "My name is Alara Thorne. And my daddy didn't buy me a mommy for Christmas." The crowd chuckled nervously, remembering the scandal. "He found her," Alara said, looking back at Kaya. "And he kept her. So this song is for them." She tucked the violin under her chin. She raised the bow. And she began to play. It wasn't perfect, it squeaked a little on the high notes, but to Julian Thorne, watching his wife and daughter from the stage, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. He looked out at the glittering room, then back at his family. He had spent his life building towers that scraped the sky, but he had finally learned the truth. The only things that mattered were the things he could hold in his arms.